The Salvager and the Beast. The wind on Maltar Ridge never stopped screaming. It whistled through broken Star Cruiser ribs and bent metal like a dirge over an unmarked graveyard. Joran Veil, grease-slicked and sun-scarred, stood on the edge of a collapsed engine core and scanned the horizon with a mechanic's eye, not for beauty, but for salvage. Every twisted bulkhead, every fried panel was a promise of spare parts, and right now, Joran needed a miracle. His old freighter, the Kettle Crank, had finally given out 2 systems back. He'd limped her into Maltar on fumes and failing faith, hoping to trade repairs for fuel from one of the local junk clans. But they'd scattered after the Empire's latest skirmish. What was left was fire-scorched silence and miles of dead machines. He descended into the wreck slowly, boots sliding on blackened deck plates. This warship had been Draxen, judging by the layout and biomatter burns. Probably a troop carrier, based on the blood smears and blast craters. Whatever killed it had done so with extreme precision, not a crash, not an accident. An execution. That's when he heard the sound. Not the shifting metal groan of a dying hulk, not the distant wind keening through armor slats. A breath. Deep. Wet. Ragged. He froze, instincts flaring. Not a scavenger, not a ghost. Something alive. His boots made no sound as he moved forward, past cracked cryopods, twisted benches, a floor streaked with soot and faded blood. He followed the sound to a ruptured wall at the ship's heart, where wiring dripped like veins from a split bulkhead. And there, half buried under collapsed steel and bristling debris, was the source. It was a wolf. At least, that was the closest word Joran's mind could find for it. It was massive, easily 9 feet long from snout to tail, its body twisted beneath a collapsed pillar. Its fur was matted with blood and ash, streaked with what looked like light reactive fibers. Its ribs rose and fell in a jagged rhythm, and when its one good eye opened, gold and glowing like a furnace, it met Joran's with a stare that didn't plead. It dared. The creature bared its fangs, low and weak, unable to rise. One leg twitched, the other was shattered beneath metal. It should have looked like a monster, but it didn't. It looked betrayed. Joran didn't move closer. He crouched slowly, letting the wrench clatter from his hand to show he meant no harm. "Well," he said softly, "looks like you're having a rougher day than me." The wolf growled, not loud, just enough to say, "Don't come closer unless you mean it." Joran nodded once, stood, and scanned the wreck nearby. An old med pack. A salvaged injector. A cracked coolant line that hadn't fully vented. Good enough. He worked silently, sliding the beam from the creature's flank, using hydraulic braces scavenged from a lifter jack. Every groan of metal made the wolf snarl, but it didn't snap. When the last bar fell away, the creature sagged into the floor with a low grunt, its blood pooling like ink beneath the plating. Joran knelt and pressed a rag to the wound. The wolf flinched. "Relax," he murmured. "I'm good with broken things." It didn't trust him, not yet. But it allowed the pressure. That was enough. Forging trust. 3 hours later, he'd stopped the bleeding, built a crude splint from carbon struts, and rerouted a cracked power node to create a low-level heat vent near its resting spot. "You're going to live," he said, half to himself. The wolf watched him, then lowered its head. Joran exhaled and, for the first time since landing on this hell's cape, felt something that wasn't dread. He sat against the wall beside the creature and stared out through the collapsed hull, where distant lightning danced above the dunes. He didn't know what it was, didn't know where it had come from, what it had done, or what it could still do. But it hadn't killed him, and he hadn't left it behind. That made them even. For now. Joran spent the first 5 days hauling gear from the wreck into what was left of a broken transport bay. It was mostly exposed to the sky, but a few slanted beams gave decent cover, and the heat from the makeshift core he jury-rigged kept the nights bearable. The wolf stayed there, curled in the corner like a dying shadow, its breathing still shallow but no longer desperate. Joran hadn't named it, names felt wrong for something wild, something proud. He spoke to it anyway. Not like a pet, not like a person. Like a partner who hadn't yet decided to leave. "You've got armor under that fur," he muttered one night while welding a harness frame from a fractured stabilizer. "Reinforced bone plating, maybe. Draxen genetically spliced. You weren't born, you were made." The wolf blinked once. "That's why you're still alive, huh? Even with a beam through your leg." It didn't blink again. By day 7, it stood. Shakily. Slowly. Joran had left food at the edge of the heat circle, protein bricks, flavorless but packed with calories. The wolf limped to it, snarled at the package, tore it open, and devoured it in 2 bites. Progress. The days stretched into weeks. Joran built an exosplint brace for its leg, letting it walk further each day. The creature watched him rebuild the ship's long-dead antenna with scraps from old comms modules. It sniffed the plasma lines he rethreaded. It even curled once beside his cot when the heat dipped below safe levels. But it never let him touch it. Until the night the storm came. A sand gale, thick as soup and sharp enough to flay skin, rolled in fast, the kind that tears holes from bone and buries machines in minutes. Joran scrambled to anchor everything. The makeshift roof gave way. Sparks flew. The heat node ruptured. Then, from the dark, the wolf moved. It barreled into the storm wall like a fury, its plated side shielding Joran as he dragged himself beneath a broken chassis. Wind howled. Debris pelted them both. Joran saw its legs shaking, eyes narrowed against the grit. When the storm passed hours later, Joran emerged covered in ash. The wolf collapsed beside him. This time, Joran didn't hesitate. He knelt, pressed a hand to its chest, and whispered, "You're insane." The wolf didn't growl. It rested its head on his knee. Joran sat there, stunned, as the sun rose red above the ridge. Then he laughed, low, ragged, real. "I guess we're in this together now." The wolf blinked once, and that was the moment Joran finally gave it a name. "Core," he said. "Means, fury that stands. You like it?" Core didn't answer, but he didn't walk away. And from that moment forward, Joran Veil was never seen without a giant metal-plated wolf at his side. The Queen's hunter. Gavlan Station hung above the toxic clouds of a gas giant like a cracked glass chandelier, half-lit and full of rot. The Empire had abandoned it 2 cycles ago after the harvest rigs failed. Since then, it had become a haven for those who preferred not to be found. Joran guided his newly rebuilt freighter, welded together from the Kettle Crank's core systems and Draxen Salvage, into the station's lower docks. He'd named the patchwork ship the Maltar Ghost, a joke only he and Core understood. The docking clamps engaged with a shudder, and Joran pulled on his scarred jacket. "Stay close," he told Core. "These people smell weakness like blood." Core's golden eyes glinted in the dim cabin light. The beast had grown even larger in the 3 months since Maltar Ridge. The makeshift exosplint had been replaced with a sleek cybernetic enhancement that Joran had crafted from Draxen tech. When Core moved now, you could almost mistake the faint whir of servos for a growl. The station's market level stank of spilled fuel and unwashed bodies. Merchants hawked contraband from improvised stalls, eyes darting nervously at the sound of Core's metal claws clicking against the deck plates. Conversations hushed as they passed. Hands moved to weapons, then slowly away. Looking for the wayward son, Joran told a scarred dock attendant, sliding across a credit chip. The man's eyes flicked from Joran to Core, then back. "Hangar 17. But I'd steer clear if I were you. Avelian doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests." Joran smiled thinly. "I've got an invitation." Hangar 17 was guarded by 4 mercenaries in mismatched armor. They tensed at the sight of Core, plasma rifles coming up. "Easy," Joran said, raising empty hands. I'm here about the job. The tallest guard, a woman with an implant gleaming where her left eye should be, nodded curtly. Weapons stay outside. He's not a weapon, Joran replied. He's a partner. She stared at Kor, who stared back with unblinking intensity. After a moment, she stepped aside. Inside, the hangar was a hive of activity. A sleek cruiser, the Wayward Sun, was being loaded with crates by a crew of hard-eyed laborers. Standing near the loading ramp was a tall figure in blue-black armor, giving orders in a clipped, melodic accent. Captain Avelian. Not human, her skin had a faint bluish cast, and her eyes were vertical slits of amber. Crystalline ridges framed her face like a crown. She turned as they approached, and her expression shifted from irritation to surprise, then calculation. You must be Veil, she said. I wasn't expecting. Her gaze lingered on Kor. A partner, Joran finished. Is that what you call it? She circled them both, examining Kor with professional interest. That's Sovereign Guard biotech. Military grade. Illegal in 17 systems. Joran tensed. He was abandoned. I fixed him. Avelian's laugh was like breaking glass. Fixed. You've bonded with a royal hunting beast. Do you have any idea what you've done? Kor growled low, and Avelian smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp to be human. I've been searching for something like him for a long time, she said. The Queen's hunters were said to be extinct. The Queen? Joran asked. Avelian's eyes gleamed. My Queen. The last of the Draxen royalty. And she will pay handsomely for the return of her finest creation. Blood and honor. He's not for sale, Joran said flatly, hand drifting to the plasma cutter at his hip. Avelian's smile didn't waver. Everything has a price, Salvager. But I'm not asking you to sell. I'm offering you a job. She gestured toward the ship. The Queen's been in exile since the Empire decimated her homeworld. She's gathering strength, allies. Your Kor was part of her royal guard. Specially bred and bonded to protect the royal bloodline. If he's so special, why was he left to die in a wrecked carrier? Avelian's eyes narrowed. Betrayal. There was a coup attempt. The Queen's enemies struck during a diplomatic mission, scattered her forces. We thought all the hunters were killed. Kor stepped forward, teeth bared, a low rumble building in his chest. He remembers, Avelian said softly. The bond works both ways. The hunters are linked to the royal blood. He can feel her calling. Joran looked at Kor, searching the golden eyes for confirmation. The wolf met his gaze steadily, then turned back to Avelian with a snort that seemed almost contemptuous. I don't think he's interested in a reunion, Joran said. Perhaps not with me, Avelian conceded. But the Queen is different. And she needs him, needs you both. The Empire's mercenaries have found her sanctuary. We need to evacuate her before they strike. Joran frowned. Why me? Why not your own people? Because Kor won't let anyone near her without recognizing them as pack. She shrugged. And you, somehow, have become pack. The job was simple enough, on the surface. Fly to the hidden base on Kaldor's second moon. Help evacuate the Queen to her new sanctuary. Collect payment, enough credit to keep the Maltar ghost flying for years. What Avelian hadn't mentioned was the Imperial blockade. 3 warships hung in orbit around Kaldor's cratered moon, scanning patterns sweeping the surface. The Maltar ghost slipped past them by riding the magnetic shadow of a debris field, a trick Joran had learned from smugglers in the outer systems. They landed in a narrow canyon, hidden from orbital scans by the dense mineral deposits in the surrounding rock. Avelian led them through a maze of tunnels deeper and deeper under the moon's surface. How did the Empire find this place? Joran asked as they descended. The same traitor who tried to kill her before, Avelian replied grimly. We thought him dead, but he sold her location to Imperial command. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, filled with refugees. Hundreds of Draxen, tall, blue-skinned, with varying degrees of crystalline ridges marking their status, moved between makeshift shelters, preparing for evacuation. Kor stopped at the entrance, hackles rising. His golden eyes scanned the chamber, focused with predatory intensity. "What is it?" Joran asked. Avelian drew her weapon, a thin, curved blade that hummed with energy. "He senses something wrong." The attack came without warning. A group of refugees near the center of the chamber suddenly drew hidden weapons. Plasma fire erupted, cutting down those nearest to them. "Infiltrators!" Avelian shouted. "Protect the Queen!" But Kor was already moving, a streak of silver-gray fury. He crashed into the attackers like a storm, jaws closing on throats, armored flanks deflecting plasma bolts. The traitors tried to regroup, but Kor moved too fast, striking from impossible angles, his cybernetic leg launching him across distances no natural creature could cover. Joran found himself fighting alongside Avelian, using his plasma cutter to hold off attackers trying to flank Kor. The Draxen captain moved like liquid death, her blade claiming lives with each swing. When it was over, a dozen bodies lay scattered across the chamber floor. Kor stood in the center, bloodied but unharmed, standing guard over a slim figure in white. The Queen. The bond that stands. She was younger than Joran had expected, with crystalline ridges that formed a natural crown around her face. Her eyes were the same gold as Kor's, but deeper, ancient with sorrow and knowledge. Kor bowed his head as she approached, a gesture Joran had never seen him make before. The Queen knelt before the beast, unmindful of the blood on the floor, and placed her forehead against Kor's. "Valkyr," she whispered. "My guardian." Kor, Valkyr, made a soft sound, almost a whine. The Queen closed her eyes, and for a moment, they seemed locked in silent communion. Then she turned to Joran. "You saved him," she said, her voice musical despite the gravity of the situation. "When everyone else had abandoned him." Joran shrugged uncomfortably. "He saved me too." The Queen smiled. "That is Valkyr's nature. But his bond with you." She tilted her head, studying him with those ancient eyes. "It is unprecedented. He has chosen you." "Majesty," Avelian interrupted. "We must evacuate immediately. The Imperial forces will have detected the weapon's fire." The Queen nodded, but kept her eyes on Joran. "Will you help us once more, Salvager? My people need safe passage." The evacuation was chaos. Imperial dropships landed on the moon's surface as they were loading the refugees onto the Maltar Ghost, and the wayward son of Elian's crew held them off while the ships prepared for launch. "We won't all fit," Joran told the Queen as the last refugees boarded. "The engines can't handle the weight." "Then take those who cannot fight," she replied, drawing a slender pistol from her robes. "Avelian and I will hold them here." Valkyr growled, placing himself between the Queen and the entrance. "No," Joran said. "We leave together or not at all." He turned to the ship's console, hands flying over the controls. "If I bypass the safety protocols on the fusion core, I can get us enough thrust for one good push. It won't be pretty, and we'll need a new engine after, but it'll get us past the blockade." The Queen studied him, then nodded once. "Do it." They launched as Imperial troops breached the cavern. The Maltar Ghost shuddered and groaned as its overloaded engine strained against gravity. Joran's jury-rigged bypass held just long enough to break atmosphere, the ship trailing fire like a dying comet. The Imperial warships moved to intercept, but the wayward sun was waiting. Avelian's sleek cruiser provided covering fire, drawing the blockade away while the Ghost limped toward the jump point. "We won't make it," Avelian's voice crackled over the comm, "the sun's shields are failing." The Queen moved to Joran's side. "My hunter," she said softly. "Will you stand with us one last time?" Joran looked at Valkyr, who met his gaze with steady golden eyes. Always, Joran replied. He swung the Ghost around, positioning the failing ship between the Imperial warships, and the wayward son Valkyr pressed against his leg as they watched the targeting systems lock on. Jump now, Joran told Avelian. We'll keep them busy. Salvager dash, she began. Now. The wayward son vanished in a flash of distorted space, carrying the Queen and her people to safety. Joran turned to Valkyr. Together then, partner. The battle was brief and desperate. The Maltar Ghost was never designed for combat, but Joran flew her like she was born for it, weaving through plasma fire, using the debris field to mask their approach. Valkyr worked the secondary systems, his enhanced senses allowing him to predict enemy movements before they happened. They managed to disable one warship before their engines finally gave out. As the Imperial boarding pods attached to their hull, Joran prepared for a last stand. But the expected assault never came. Instead, the comms system crackled to life. Impressive flying, Salvager. A new voice, cold and precise. The Empire recognizes talent when it sees it. Don't expect a surrender, Joran replied. I expect nothing of the sort. I offer an alternative. The Empire has lost a valuable asset, the Queen's genetic knowledge. But we have gained another, you and the hunter. Valkyr snarled at the voice. You hunt well together, the Imperial commander continued. The Empire can use such skills. Serve us, track our enemies, and live in comfort rather than die in obscurity. Joran looked at Valkyr, saw the fury in those golden eyes. We don't hunt for you, he said. We hunt for ourselves. And what is it you hunt, Salvager? Joran smiled grimly. Freedom. He engaged the final protocol, the one he'd installed after Maltar Ridge. The ship's remaining power surged into the jump drive. It wasn't enough for a controlled jump, but it was enough to tear a hole in space. As the Maltar Ghost vanished from Imperial sensors, the commander ordered a full scan of the sector. They found nothing. The Salvager and the hunter had disappeared without a trace. 6 months later, stories began to spread through the outer systems. Tales of Imperial outposts found abandoned. Supply lines disrupted. Prison transports mysteriously emptied of their Draxen captives. And always, witnesses reported the same thing, a battered freighter that appeared from nowhere, and a man who walked with a giant, metal-plated wolf at his side. They called them the Queen's Shadow. Her invisible army. But Joran and Valkyr called themselves something simpler. Partners. The end.